Yesterday's price is not today's price.
This is the Dynasty Market Watch, episode 1.09. I'm Todd Halverson. I'm joined as always by Brian O'Leary and Matt Davis. This week we have a special guest. David Plaut is joining us at DSP4150 on Twitter. If you don't follow David already, you definitely should, because first off, he's super smart, but he also posts a lot of content that's easily digestible.
Yeah, when we started this show, we were thinking of guests recently to have on, and David was someone that stood out to me. I don't know, maybe a year or two ago. Whenever I noticed him on Twitter, it was just kind of in the comments of like the tweet comments of content creators. And I was like, man, this dude is always just making smart comments.
Yeah,
so I started following him since then. But David, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, guys. Excited to be here.
So, David, one of your things that you're really known for, or at least that I know you for, is the expected fantasy points per game. Throughout the show, we're going to refer to the expected fantasy points per game, but I kind of want to start off by just making sure we have a good baseline for what expected fantasy points per game is and how we can use it kind of like in our player evaluations. So most of us have like a job resume, and at the top of the resume or maybe on the cover letter, we all have that section that shows like what are our strengths or what are our skills. So David, what I want to know is at the top of expected fantasy points resume, what does it say?
Yeah, so for me, expected fantasy points is kind of just my catch-all metric to summarize players' peripherals. We know things like target share are really important, but target share by itself does not actually score points. So really what we see is that when you get these magical fantasy seasons, it's really born out of opportunity and volume. So using expected fantasy points basically derives what an average player would score based on that specific player's usage. For example, we know with running backs, red zone usage and goal line work is much more valuable. So I would consider something like that. Really, xFPPG just combines all of these factors into one easily digestible metric.
Yeah, so just, speaking in here, like this is something that was totally foreign to me until I started seeing you on your timeline and we played a bunch of leagues together. So that's kind of where I learned about it. And I'm really excited to kind of get a deeper dive into discussing what all of this stuff means. And hopefully, you can guide us to the promised land here in the next couple minutes.
Hope so.
All right, so we'll go ahead and get it rolling. We got a lot in store, so we're gonna be talking CJ Stroud. He seems to be a hot topic all across group chats and Twitter these days. We'll talk CJ Stroud and his wide receivers. On the other side of the coin, we have Bryce Young, and he's been struggling, so we'll talk him. David's gonna give us some vets maybe that we could look at to buy in a playoff run, and of course we'll talk some trades. But as always, we start off giving our bull or bear of the week. So David, you're the guest. Kick us off. Who you got, bull or bear, this week?
Yeah, so I think my bull for the week is Javonte Williams. We know that last year he suffered a pretty gruesome knee injury. We know that running backs take a little bit of time to get back up to speed. Over the summer, there were rumors he wouldn't really be playing much until midseason. All of a sudden, he's back week 1. Fast forward a little bit, and since week 7, he has really been catching my attention. That's when he first surpassed a 50% snap count, and he's maintained it ever since. And in the meantime, from week 7 to 10, he's handled nearly 70% of rush attempts. He's run 35% of the routes, and he's had a 17% target share in these weeks. So pretty good. And on that usage, that's 18.8 expected points per game, which would be RB5 on the year. So coming on a little bit later. And that's
since when?
That's week 7 to 10. So okay. A little bit later than some hoped, but feeling pretty good about him recently.
Matt, he looked like he had some juice yesterday in the game, in the Monday night game.
Yeah, I mean, so back when we had Dynasty Zoltan on a few weeks ago, I think it was a week after the Broncos beat my stupid team, the Packers, and that's when I made Javonte my bull of the week. I was like, man, this guy is coming. So And I think we've seen that the last few weeks. Like you said, his price has gone up. That's why I was saying go ahead and get him a few weeks ago. I still think that was a great buy opportunity because he's not really exploding yet.
Sure. Yeah, David. So what are you buying Javonte for this week?
Yeah, so I think based on the fantasy calc valuations, there's some pretty similarly valued players that I would pretty easily move him for. That includes DJ Moore, Rashad White, George Kittle, Alvin Kamara as well. You could probably get a plus if you're moving from Alvin Kamara down to Javonte.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, no, I would take the Javonte side on pretty much every single one of those. Yeah, my bear of the week is actually going to be Christian Watson. That is a guy that I was trying to be a little bit patient with this year as a Packers fan, just rooting for him in general, and also as a fantasy asset, a dynasty asset. And David, I know you had a tweet earlier, about his Watson's fantasy points over expectation, how he's underperforming. I do think that that Jordan Love's struggles this year has a little bit to do with that. But just as a Packers fan, Christian Watson is not one of the top 3 wide receivers on this team. A guy named Dontavian Wicks, who most dynasty players might not have even ever heard of, is definitely playing better than Christian Watson this year. So Jaden Reed and Dobbs and Wicks, I think they're all better than Christian Watson. He does not give any effort. Big thing on Packers Twitter this week has been he is absolutely soft at the catch point. He gets pushed around. He doesn't go up and get the ball. He doesn't do his quarterbacks any favors. So I'm pretty much out on Christian Watson.
So you're just cutting bait, Matt, just for anything you can get here at this point?
Pretty much. I think you can get a second. I mean, the move I'm trying to make right now, if I have Christian Watson, I'm probably trying to trade him for Jaden Reed. The Jaden Reed owner is probably not going to do that anymore. You could have gotten a plus 2 weeks ago if you wanted to do that. But yeah, I just want off Christian Watson. I don't think he gives a shit. I don't think he tries when he plays. I don't think he puts a lot of effort into his craft.
Damn, that's an accusation.
That's amazing.
It's not a guy I want to invest in. So
that's fair. So I mean,
yeah, I'm cutting bait.
I've gotten rid of all my Christian Watson. I would maybe buy for a second, but yeah, Matt, I'm kind of with you. I really don't want to deal with them. David, I'm kind of curious. His expected fantasy points per game. What are you seeing with him?
Yeah, so we'll get into the other piece of this in a little bit later, but right now through 6 Watson games and 8 Nico Collins games, they have the same expected points per game at 12.6. Obviously, Christian Watson has been performing much worse than Nico. So the points per game is at 15.4 Nico to 7.2 Christian Watson. And they are really having just opposite seasons. I think CJ Stroud is proving to be an awesome quarterback and really enhancing talent around him. And Jordan Love is pretty much doing the opposite. Also, individually, Nico is playing better than Christian Watson, that's for sure. But I'm weekly trending towards regress to the mean for Christian Watson. I think he totally can put it together and be a 12-point per game guy. I think over the summer, I was more bullish than that. So I've scaled back some, but still
Well, I think it's a fair point that if you're gonna, like, let's say you listen to this and you agree with me and you think he's a sell, that doesn't mean you need to go out and sell him this week. There's not really a lot of demand for him. Like Brian always preaches every single week, wait till a blow-up game, then sell your guy that you want to get off of. And Christian Watson has a type of profile. He has a type of play style. He's gonna have a blow-up week. Like, I would be shocked if he doesn't in the next 7 weeks or whatever. But
yeah, he's the type of guy that can easily go for 2 touchdowns at any point.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So my bull of the week is going to churn some stomachs. And it's going to get some moans and some groans. So, like when you're a kid, your parents give you some advice that just feels like completely irrelevant. It doesn't feel like it's worth anything at the moment, but like later in life, it actually can be of value. Like if you think about like saving money, as a 10-year-old feels absurd. and we don't want to wait. We don't want to like wait to not get like the toy or the video game that it is we want. So I'm about to give you advice on a player that's not going to yield you any results now, and maybe not even in the next 12 months, but I think it will at some point down the road, and it's not going to cost you much. And the guy that I'm bullish on right now is Trey Lance. I think that he's worth about a couple of thirds, maybe a throw in on a trade. You're working a deal with someone, you feel like, man, I'm really like a third short here, but like I'm probably just gonna go ahead and hit accept. Just ask for Trey Lance. At some point, he is going to get a chance to play. It may not even be a chance to fully start. It could be like a Taylor Heineke type deal. It may not be a week one starter, but it could be a mid-season start. And I think he's going to at least be worth more today than what he is, worth more later than he is today.
Oh,
So you guys can just sit dumbfounded.
I think the best thing I can say here is let's talk about someone that's actually good at football right now. I think that's what people care about a little bit more. Trey Lance is hurt most of us.
I took the wind out of the podcast. I won't lie.
It's things I'm not ready to see his name on my roster anymore at the moment than it already is. So let's transition to CJ Stroud, a little bit sexier. A little more successful, a little more results driven, a little more everything. He is not a bull for me. He's a bear. And that is, I'm selling him if he's going to be viewed as QB2, QB3 in Dynasty.
And you might roll your eyes and be like QB2 or QB3, but there were tweets this past week saying CJ Stroud QB2, QB3. So there's people out there that actually might think it.
This is strictly a nothing personal. This is all business. If someone's viewing a non-rushing quarterback as QB2, QB3 above like someone like Josh Allen, I'm going to sell the shit out of him. I can't help it. I like the player. I love him as a player. He might become one of the best players of all time. Like, we were talking about in our group chats. I'm sure everyone else was, but there's a lot of ifs that go into that. So QB2, QB3, I'm selling. Otherwise, I probably want to hold. But
so that's the thing. Like I don't know how common that is, but that's the point I wanted to clarify, because I think we're all going to agree here. I've been really high on Stroud all year. I'm absolutely flipping my Stroud shares for Josh Allen and still even Jalen Hurts. Definitely. But it sounds like outside Pat Mahomes, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, you're not selling Stroud. You're only selling Stroud to get one of those three guys.
I'm selling him when he's overvalued, and I think that's an overvalue that people will make. Especially Josh Allen and the Bills struggling like a mother right now. Like that's a thing that's going to happen the next week.
So
right,
David,
right. So I'm just trying to say he's overvalued if you can get Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts, but you're not. Are you like? Would you trade him straight up for Joe Burrow or Justin Herbert right now?
I'm not even saying like you have to trade him for Josh Allen. I'm saying if they treat him like a Josh Allen in terms of a trade, so I can get that type of yield as what I would get for Josh Allen.
Okay. Oh,
I'm not saying direct Josh Allen, but if I can get the same type of yield of what Mahomes or Allen gets or Hurts, I'm doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So Brian, for you, is he still in the tier of like Herbert, Burrow?
I mean, I think he kind of has to be. He projects to be that type of player, and they have a longer track record of doing things. He looks cool, and he's having a record-breaking rookie season. I get that, but
so David, thinking expected fantasy points per game. Brian mentioned that he doesn't rush. What are you seeing from an expected fantasy points per game? I guess another you mentioned it earlier, but fantasy points over expected FPOE. How is he doing versus what you would expect?
Yeah, so Stroud is crushing it for sure, and I'll just say right now he's functionally the same as Burrow and Herbert for me. But I've also at times been pretty uncomfortable with their valuations when they approach the Allen, Hurts, Mahomes tier. So back to fantasy points. He's coming in, and so this is 5-point passing scoring, pass touchdown scoring. So he's coming in at 20 expected points per game and nearly 22 actual points per game. So, mild outperformance. And he's really outperforming pretty much across the board. For quarterbacks, the expected points per game are broken up into 5 categories, and that would be passing yards, touchdowns, interceptions, as well as rushing yards and rushing touchdowns. He's pretty much dead even on his expected rushing, which is relatively low, but he's getting what he should. And then he is doing better on touchdowns. He's doing better on interceptions. For his passing work, he's actually coming in right between Sam Howell and Josh Allen, which are kind of funny names, but both of those guys are really throwing a lot. So it makes sense. But he's coming in right at like the 9th highest expected points from passing.
So with quarterbacks and expected fantasy points per game, do we see like the elite ones, Pat Mahomes, Joe Burrow? Do we see them consistently outperform their expectations every year, or is there something baked in where we kind of know it's Pat Mahomes and the 22 points per game is already baked into that with all of that?
Mm-hmm. The answer is sometimes they will outperform it, and I think the elites of the elites are more likely to outperform than less good players, but it doesn't always occur. For example, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen are both above expectation by 1.6 points, and then Justin Herbert is under expectation by 0.6 points. However, I think at quarterback, I'm more inclined to believe that the efficiency of the quarterback will allow for outperformance rather than underperformance. So on the whole, I'd expect them to come pretty close to matching or outperform slightly.
Okay, yeah, no, that makes sense to me.
Let's kind of pivot quickly to some rookies. And the first rookie, we've kind of already vaguely talked about this offense, so I think it's appropriate that we could probably touch on other players within this offense as well once we start going. But Tank Dell for the Texans, obviously didn't have the highest draft capital, didn't have a ton of hype around in rookie season. He's obviously kind of small or very small. I think what's been kind of interesting with him is his obvious shift in that value of that perception in such a quick amount of time. We're giving a lot of credit to CJ Stroud. I get that, but he's attached to him. So Todd, I saw you raise this question, or at least this is what you're kind of seeing that the buy value is. Is Tank Dell worth a first right now?
Yeah. So like on KTC, KTC right now, he's wide receiver 20, which is not always a great barometer, but Fantasy Calc, wide receiver 24. Would have really no issue if I had a few first, sending one of them for Tank Dell.
I'm a little uncomfortable with that if we're being honest.
So my issue with sending a late first for a guy like Tank Dell is that I really don't want to use my first for like wide receiver 20 to 25 or even whatever rank you've got him at. I would rather use it for something else, something cooler, trade up and go get a top 10 wide receiver with, pair it with something else. But if let's say there's a lot of teams out there that are tanking. Maybe you've already kind of solidified your pick and you're like, I kind of need to use one of these late first that I've piled up. I wouldn't mind, I wouldn't mind buying in on CJ Stroud and doing it through Tank Dell.
I think
I've got him ahead of Nico Collins at this point.
I think it's fair to have him ahead of Nico Collins at this point. I can't really find a lot of scenarios where I'm paying a first for Tank Dell. Like we've talked about, like you just kind of mentioned, Todd, that's a bullet you can only fire once in most situations. Sure, you can have surplus ones, but if it's your own and if it's your own first and you're a contender, if I'm a juggernaut team, I'm okay sending my 24 first for Tank Dell. That might be like the only situation. I don't ever want to get into a situation where that pick falls to 106. I'm not that confident in Tank Dell. So that's kind of where I'm
right.
at.
Yeah.
So Todd talked about having potentially multiple first. And I think it's a good scenario to think about because, the style of our play, all four of us here, I'm familiar with you guys. We like, bunching up our firsts here.
Yeah.
Would we rather have paid 2 firsts for Tyreek Hill, or are we paying 1 first for Tank Dell? Like, obviously, there's the limitations potentially of Tyreek's length of career, but obvious impact, right? So, like, I paid 2 firsts for Tyreek this morning. So, like, that's an extra first, obvious value change, a little more like solidified as a point producer. David, where you stand on that?
For me.
Sure.
It's different team styles for me. Like, I'm not going to do that. I'd rather have Tyreek for the extra first on a contender. But if I'm maybe a team on the come up, I'd rather save the first. And now, like Matt said, I don't want that first to turn into 106, 107, 108. I'm talking about a very late first. Maybe we got 3 or 4 of them. Okay, sure. I'll send the one that I think is the worst, probably a team that's already solidified to buy. I would rather try to send 3 2s or something for Tank Dell. That's not going to get done. Like, it's just not. So it's either, do you want to send a late first? And I'm going to be honest, I think there's probably some scenarios where you could send a late first and they'd reject it. But are you willing to do that? If it's one of like 3 or 4 that I've got and it's really late, I think I would.
What do you think, David?
Yeah, so it's always a funny question for me when you ask, would you send a first? Because I'd send a first in value, but I wouldn't necessarily want it to actually be a first-round pick. I think there's some older vets in that same value range that don't have meaningful point advantages over Tank. And I pretty happily flip them into Tank. I think if I had a solidified buy team, I would be probably comfortable sending that first for Tank. I'd much rather, do it in, 4 quarters rather than the dollar, for sure. But if it's a pretty late first, I could get there. I think he's having a really awesome season. So in addition to my expected points per game work, another thing that I do is I maintain a list of thresholds on some different peripheral metrics, and I monitor them and then bucket wide receivers into that. And for me, Tank Dell fits into what I call the watch list, which is basically like young guys that probably are pretty good. I don't know if they're total cornerstones yet, but I'm really watching them closely. And Tank Dell is he's crushing in those thresholds that I look for. So he's clearing my pretty good thresholds on his per route data, and he's also doing it on his points per game and expected points per game. So I'm pretty excited about him, but I'm not sure come April if he'll be valued higher than the wide receiver 3 or 4 in the class, which is going to be in that 106 to 108 range.
It's a pretty nice looking wide receiver class at the moment for sure. Okay, so we're talking thriving quarterback. Why don't we kind of pivot and switch over to a couple rookie quarterbacks that have had some ups and downs this year? So that's Will Levis, Bryce Young. We were slamming on the table for about 2-3 weeks with Will Levis.
For about half an hour.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time, and if you include the Jacob podcast, another 45 minutes there. So Matt, you bought 6 shares, a couple pretty aggressive prices. Are you at all concerned right now with the last couple of weeks? I know the Titans' offensive line stinks and their weapons aren't the best.
As a Titans fan, you're really not giving enough credit to how bad that offensive line is.
So I thought Levis was dope against Pittsburgh, man. Like I did not think he played bad. I did not see the game against Tampa Bay. So Todd, as a Titans fan, did you watch that game?
No, I didn't watch that game. It's the Titans. I mean, I
was hoping to get some.
He's a Titans fan. No, why would I watch?
Why would I? I don't want to watch Andre Dillard at left tackle or at right tackle just get destroyed. No. So, I think he's got. I mean, at this point, what you're basing off with Will Levis is insane arm talent and projection. That's basically what it is. I mean, there's not a lot there besides that, and I'm fine with taking the gamble like you did and like I'm kind of trying to do. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I mean, I
gamble.
just don't have any concerns about Will Levis yet. I mean, that's not saying like I think he's crushing. Obviously, he did not perform well, at least in the box score this past weekend. But right now, I don't feel any differently than I did 2 weeks ago about the bet that we're placing on Will Levis.
You're strong.
Yeah,
David?
pretty much. David, what are you thinking about Levis?
Yeah, I'm pretty much in the same boat. I think he clearly has a high value ceiling. The likelihood to get there is murky at best, for sure. But I think the price to find out is not prohibitive. I have tried to buy some Levis. I've been unsuccessful, unfortunately. I'm hoping I can try again this week and maybe get a couple across the finish line with the lackluster game.
David, if you don't mind me asking, what were some of your failed trade attempts?
I was looking to move late 1s and 2s, and I was getting counters for, send 2 firsts and get a late second back.
Jesus. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, the ones that we saw a lot go down, and I know Matt had some, were type of mid-first type of value. It was kind of across the board. I think you might be, after the last 2 weeks, I think you might be able to do late first again and maybe get him.
Yeah, I'm happy to send a late first and a second, so the first and a second of a competitive team. I think I'm pretty happy to send that, and maybe.
What about a 25 random, not random, but a random good team this year?
I don't love doing that.
Yeah, that makes me uncomfortable as well.
It makes me,
because then you're like, all right, there were 2 injuries away, 1 bad move away from a missed playoff, and then bam, I picked 104.
For those that don't know, David is
he's
definitely a future pick hoarder. That's the first impression I got of him when we met just through leagues. He's definitely hoarding those extra picks, valuing them.
Yeah, that does not surprise me at all.
I don't think I've traded away any of my 25 firsts at this point, and I'm in 28 leagues. So
that's impressive willpower right there.
There's a guy I follow on Twitter called Adam Harstead that has a lot of similar philosophies, I think, to you. One of his quotes that I really love was I think if I'm saying it correctly, it's I store my excess depth on other people's rosters and use their picks to access, or something along those lines. And I'm like, man, that's such a great way of thinking about it. And if you can pull it off, I mean, it's definitely a great way to approach it.
I'm glad you said that. I remind you a bit of Harstead, because I get all of my good takes from either Adam Harstead or Jacob Sanderson. So.
Oh, nice. Yeah, Jacob, big friend of the pod. We love Jacob over here.
Is anybody on here? So let's shift to Bryce Young, the first pick from the 2024 NFL draft, the guy that nobody really wants to talk about right now. Is anybody here willing to send a first for Bryce Young? We're willing. It sounds like we're willing to send a 24 first for Will Levis. Are we willing to send one, David, Matt, Brian, for Bryce Young? I'm not. I'm not going to send
oof.
I think Bryce Young sucks, so I'm not.
I don't know. I can get on board with sending the same first that I would send for Tank Dell. I could get on board with sending that. But as we spoke about, that's going to be my pretty much bye-week locks that I'm sending.
So are we consensus Bryce Young over Will Levis, Brian?
I sent 2 offers for Bryce Young, sending Bryce Young for Will Levis last week, or actually right before the Pittsburgh game, and it was declined 1-1. So I don't want any part of Bryce Young. The only part that I got of him was just because I'm in so many leagues, I just kind of defaulted taking him. I saw him and Stroud kind of similarly-ish. They both don't rush. They both have unknown offensive weapons. Obviously, Stroud that's bit me in the ass quite a bit, but I want out. But I did see just Dynasty IM _IM on Twitter. He was touting to hopefully have a little patience. He's not doing as bad as you think, that type of stuff. So I mean, Bryce Young has no help. So let's start there. He's probably not getting any help anytime soon, though. It's the thing.
So his
think David,
expected fantasy points per game is probably not going to
Yeah.
exceed anytime soon.
but like I think David, you tweeted something about this. Like, he's small, he doesn't rush, doesn't have weapons. Like, what did we really expect short term, like in terms of like what his production is going to be? So just because he's the first pick, I don't know. I never really saw it, so we'll see.
Let's shift to one more rookie, and this is Matt's guy, Pop Douglas. So Matt, I know you're in on Pop. You've sold me to get him in a couple teams. You're buying him?
Yeah, man. I was so happy to see that Pop performance on Sunday morning, especially in such a miserable game to watch in an island game. Sorry, David. I know you're a Patriots fan. But that's kind of more of what we've been waiting for. I got so pissed off earlier in the season when Pop had that stupid fumble that wasn't even his fault, and then Bill benched him like for an entire game and a half. I think that kind of messed up his development, his expected value curve this year. So yeah, man, I'm all in on Pop. I think we have a couple Patriots fans in our group chat that we're in that alerted us to him over the summer. So I have an absolutely absurd 60% rostership. I have 12 shares of him in 20 leagues. And back when I picked all of them up, I was like, man, I hope this guy pops enough for me to just sell him for a second and then get that profit. And right now, I'm not really selling for 1 second right now. It would have to be early.
Matt, what did you take him for David's benefit? What did you take him in our rookie redraft like a month or so?
Oh, the rookie redraft, I took him 207.
Who was he sandwiched between?
Tyjae Spears, I believe you took at 206, Brian, and then Mike Dynasty Zoltan took Luke Musgrave at 208.
Yeah.
And I was considering Musgrave at that 207 pick. I thought that was probably the better pick at the time, but I also had a ton of Musgrave, and I just kind of went with Pop, just kind of like a gut call. Basically, they were a coin flip, him and Musgrave to me, but I love everything I've seen from him. David, what are you seeing with Pop?
Yeah, so I was all over Pop over the summer. Huge Patriots fan. It's been a tough season, but Pop's been the bright spot on the offense. So I'm really impressed with him in terms of the per route peripherals he's been putting up. His play time has been pretty inconsistent through games with some benching and just being. I mean, he's a 6th round pick, so he hasn't really been getting full snap shares until recently. So his per game stuff doesn't look that great yet, but I'm pretty excited about what I'm seeing. I'm a little concerned about the late draft cap and just being a tiny human being in terms of what the upside can be. But he definitely looks like a real player, and on an offense devoid of really any talent beyond him, I'm pretty excited to see what he can do.
So speaking of your short kings, so we'll go from Pop Douglas here. Let's get into our vet report, hit on some vets, and talk about Kyler Murray. And David, I'm actually just going to kind of turn it over to you because you've been harping on Kyler Murray all summer, all fall, and he finally returned. So I know you're excited. So Kyler Murray, take the floor. It's yours.
Yeah, I mean, this weekend was a proud dad moment for me, basically. Kyler's, in terms of fantasy quarterbacks, I a couple years ago was pretty comfortable taking him in the same range as Lamar Jackson, and I am going to get right back there again. He looked awesome scrambling this weekend. He put up 6 for 33 yards and a touchdown. On one of his scrambles, he hit his fastest speed since the beginning of the 2021 season. Which is pretty insane for either his 5th or 6th rush in his first game back. So the knee looks great. As a quarterback, I think he hit some pretty good throws. Maybe a little bit of rust here and there on the interception. There was a later throw to Trey McBride that kind of looked like an arm punt, but there was probably a miscommunication. There was a little video segment where Trey McBride said he ran the route differently than he had been running it all day. So I suspect there's something up there. But I'm just so in on Kyler as a fantasy asset. He runs. He is a competent to above average quarterback in terms of throwing, and he is on a huge deal and will play for either the Cardinals or someone else.
Man, this video game like BS narrative that's been going around, him being short, like people that think he's not a good leader, all this other crap that like, first of all, that doesn't impact our fantasy points that you get by having him. But like it was always crazy to me. You and I have talked at great length about Kyler and how it was just like, this makes no sense how people are basically giving away this like insane value. And maybe it was you. I saw on Twitter he went from like QB 18 to QB 11 after 1 week. Like
Fantasy Calc has him at QB8 right now, right behind
QB8.
Lamar Jackson. And remember, Fantasy Calc is real trades that are happening. So like that, he is now being traded as the QB8 ahead of Tua, Anthony Richard, Trevor Lawrence. I mean, that's where I would have him too. I mean, him right there. I mean, Matt or David, you said it right there with Lamar Jackson. That's where he's at right now.
That's where he should have been.
I'd love to move off any kind of Trevor shares for Kyler. I think you had to do that by now if you were going to. But it might still be actionable in a couple leagues.
David, what about Lamar? You mentioned Lamar versus Kyler. It sounds like they're in the same tier for you, but which one would you rather have?
They're pretty much the same to me.
Okay.
I think Lamar is probably a little bit of a better real life talent. I mean, he was the youngest MVP player. He has the better EPA per play. I think he just has more respect around the league. So like my slight preference is to Lamar, but as fantasy assets, they both rush quite a bit and they both throw also pretty well. So relatively indifferent, slight preference, Lamar.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me. Todd, do you want to get into some of your offers for one of Kyler's teammates, Trey McBride?
Yeah, so with Trey McBride, I was trying to, Matt a couple weeks ago referred to the keep trade cut.
The 2-week bump.
The 2-week bump, yeah. And I was thinking, okay, this could be the first week, but I learned quickly that the first week was actually like 3 weeks ago, and this was the second week. And so I was trying to offer the equivalent of like, first off, I was very unsuccessful getting Trey McBride. I was trying to offer like a couple of seconds. I was trying to offer like a receiver and a second, a receiver like Jahan Dotson, guys like Marquise Brown, plus a second to acquire. I mean, I offered Nico Collins, rejected on every single one of them. I was told like around like the wide receiver 20 would be like the latest. Trey McBride is like, throw out what you see on Keep Trade Cut or Fantasy Calc right now. He is being valued almost up to that wide receiver 15 to 18 range is kind of what I would say based on the people, the trades that I've talked to, and I've gone to almost every one of my leagues to try to make an offer to acquire him. Totally unsuccessful. So
I'm trading McBride for Nico in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I will admit that my offer was in a chat. It was in a chat where I was trying to figure out what, like, I just started listing off players that I had, and they just said no to all of them. And that I actually did that a couple times when they were basically like, no, I'm not moving this guy.
I think McBride is getting the shiny toy boost a little bit. As much as I love Kyler, they have other things. I think he's solid. I think he's going to be fine. But
so I almost brought this up when we were talking Tank Dell, but a little over a week ago, somebody came to me in a league and they said, "What's the McBride price?" And they had Tank Dell on their roster. So I said, "I'll flip him for Tank Dell." And they said, "Oh, wow. Okay, never mind." So apparently that was too high for them. We all kind of agreed that we're taking Tank Dell over Nico Collins. I'm not 100% sure I would still do that trade. I think I probably would take Tank Dell still, but I don't think I would take Nico Collins over Trey McBride. I think Trey McBride. So I was listening to a podcast I really like called "Stealing Bananas" with Ben Gretsch and Sean Siegel, and man, they love McBride. Their pod just released this week, and they were talking about how he's essentially the focal point of the offense. They expect him to be over Hollywood Brown as the top receiving option, the number one target for Kyler Murray the rest of the season. I don't know if that's true, but I definitely would have him 1A and 1B. And Man, I just think there's a ton of upside for Trey McBride. I think he's going to keep climbing. I don't think his price is artificially inflated right now.
Yeah, I think he's going to get. I think he's like around like almost like mid first level. I talked to one person. They said late first plus. So like if you're out there trying to buy McBride, better come up, pony up.
And if you have McBride and you feel like Brian, man, go shop that dude, because there are people that want McBride and are willing to pay for him right now. So
holy shit.
I think he's just kind of a hold for me. I'm definitely not, there's no way I'm buying McBride right now at a mid first price. I'm definitely selling. I only have like 2 or 3 McBride shares. I'm definitely selling for mid first.
People are wild. He was like a toss-in guy, like
a few weeks ago.
The season, all last year, all off season. Like I got a bunch of him as toss-ins. It was just like this is.
We did a startup that Moore League, Brian. We did a startup. I was looking at that in a couple weeks before the season started, and he went in the 14th round. So he was about a 14th round pick, startup pick, and now people want a mid first round. And I don't even think it's all that nuts. I mean, I'm not paying it, but like, there's a lot of really smart people that love Trey McBride.
I think it's pretty fair, honestly. So I famously am not a big fan of splits, but they're probably a little bit more valid for younger tight ends that suddenly are getting the actual opportunity. So, small sample size and splits bias here, but week 7 to 10, Trey McBride has 18.1 expected points per game in tight end premium scoring, which if you carry that across the season would be the tight end 3. I don't expect that to necessarily hold, but it shows that there's a real ceiling to be had here. I think Gretsch pointed this out on maybe Twitter, I believe, but his targets per out run is 28%, which is like a top 2 or 3 tight end mark. And another thing that I actually really like about Trey McBride is that he's doing this work and earning these targets on a 7.0 ADOT, which is relatively impressive for a tight end. Some other tight ends that people love, Dalton Kincaid has like a 4.0 ADOT. Evan Engram has less than a 4 ADOT. David Njoku has less than a 4 ADOT. So these are, downfield targets that is pretty impressive to me. I don't know if I'm quite there on buying for a mid first, but late first, totally in. I would probably in the same range as Tank and over Nico for me.
Yeah.
So if we're comparing him to like the rookie tight ends, you'd still have Laporta and Kincaid over McBride, or not quite sure even?
I do. I think they're arguably stronger prospects. But even if you want to call it a wash, I mean, McBride was taken 50th overall last year or something like that, so not so far off. But I just tend to prefer the guys that made their mark a little more immediately rather than taking a season and a half to get there,
and a little bit more sustained over the course of the season even.
Exactly. So
let's talk some receivers. David, we're going to fly through this. So if you could maybe give us a few buys that maybe our expected fantasy points aren't quite achieving to the level that you might be able to give them for a little bit cheaper, then maybe we can quickly toss in, Brian and Matt, what we might buy for those guys. So David, who are some guys that might be some theoretical buy lows based on expected fantasy points per game?
Yeah, so I'll break this down into kind of 3 buckets. The really high-end guys on the young end are Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. Both are fringe top 12 options on expected points per game. They're not quite there in actual points per game, but I think we know that they're really good. So those aren't necessarily, buy lows to get the best rest of season outcome, but I think they're just really good buy lows on the whole. And then, a little bit more immediate help, I would say Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp, still both top 12 options, locked and loaded for me. A little bit of quarterback concerns on Devontae, but in his 3 games with Aiden O'Connell, He is averaging 17.9 expected points per game on a 30% target share. It's only been 12.5 actual points per game. So if
Jacoby Myers is kind of no longer a thing with O'Connell at quarterback, it seems. So that's kind of the Devontae emergence.
In draft capital, what are you willing to pay for the old guys, David?
Classic late first. I would be.
I think Ryan and we talked about that. Yeah.
I would be happy to maybe take some more middle-aged guys. Like if you could take a DJ Moore, who everyone still loves, and get Devontae plus, I think that'd be really cool. I don't know if that's available in the market. But
I sent out like a 109 to 112 24 first for Cooper Kupp yesterday. So that's something that's definitely actionable. That was accepted.
I'll shameless plug my tiered trading from last week. I basically talked about all of these wide receivers and what I would do trying to trade up, trade down, and like draft capital. So Garrett Wilson, Olave, I talked about all of those.
Yeah. And for Wilson and Olave, like you definitely have to pay 2 first plus to walk in the door, pretty much, just as a a general scale there.
Yeah, I think you can probably get Adams and Kupp though. I would think most owners they're at least going to be receptive to talk and see what the price is with how disappointing they've been production wise. I think.
Yes.
Last one, Deontay Johnson. I paid. It was a 1 QB league, but today I paid a late playoff first, probably like let's just call it 109 today. But with no QBs, really, you're really looking at like the 112, 201 type of thing in a super flex league. How do you feel about that one?
I'll do it all day.
Yeah, I mean his peripherals. We've talked about expected fantasy points per game. He's been awesome since he came back from injury. I'm pretty excited about him. And listen, now Pickett is probably not going to be around much longer. If they ever figure out something at quarterback, I really like Deontay. Matt, you're shaking your head. Not a fan of what I just said.
No, I think the only thing that I think that you said that I might disagree with is, man, I think Kenny Pickett's probably going to be back next year, and I don't think it's a whole lot better. They're 6-3. Like,
circling back to Deontay, I think perception of him is growing because of the last couple of weeks too. So like now is the time.
He did have a bad game. He did just have a bad game this past week. That's what kind of opened up the window for me there.
Okay, so like just in general perception, the people that I've talked to when I've asked about them, they're definitely higher than they were. Anytime that I've talked to people before. So that's just something to keep in mind, that like this is like you're saying, if you had a bad game, goodbye window for sure. I'm paying a late one.
So David, we try to knock out a couple of our trades we made the past week or so. So we'll shift into that. Any trades that you've done, and just kind of give whether it's a tank team or a contender team, anything that you've done over the past week that you think might generate some insight.
Yeah, I think the deal I was most excited about, this was maybe a couple of days ago, offer came in cold to me. I had a tanking team with not a lot of points across most of the roster, but I had like 4 or 5 starting quarterbacks. Super flex, but only 2 could count. So having my 3rd, 4th, and 5th quarterback there, I didn't mind too much. So the offer that came in was to send Sam Howell and an early 3rd and get Zay Flowers. I think Zay's doing really well. I think he's having an awesome season. There's, probably some questions to be had if he can ever be a 20-point per game guy, but we have time to find that out. And I think Sam Howell is at best a toss-up to start beyond this year. So I'm happy to just kind of take the first-round rookie and run.
Okay.
You got any pushback there, Todd?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty bullish on Sam Howell. I think that I kind of view him as kind of locked to start next year. I'm willing to pay a late first. Now, you're getting Zay Flowers, so I'm not. I mean, that's perfectly fine to me. I do like the idea. I want to go back to what you said really quick. You said, I've got a tank team with 3, 4, 5 quarterbacks. I love the build of having like either 0 quarterbacks on a tank team or having like 4 or 5, because like you said, only 2 can start. And sure, you're probably going to get 40 points out of your quarterback spot or maybe 50 points out of your quarterback spot doing that. but you're really tying in a lot of assets into just a position, and then you can go zeros elsewhere. So I like that.
No, I pretty much try to have excess quarterbacks and excess tight ends in a lot of my tanks. The tight ends, like I have one team where I came into the year with like Pitts, Musgrave, McBride, and someone else as well. And it was kind of a weird lineup where some of the flexes only allow running backs and wide receivers. So I can only start like 2 of them.
You're hiding points
around,
nicely.
Yeah, it's a neat way to just like hide your points, but still have good value. And it doesn't even matter if they score points.
Real quick tangent. I think that's what a lot of people don't realize with tanking. There can be a lot of different creative ways where you don't just get rid of your roster isn't void of good players. You just hide them.
You hide it. Yeah.
Yeah, you're hiding in plain sight, basically, some of these points in production. I have one trade that I did this week with my cousin Pat, and I'm not sure he's feeling that great about it right now.
His cousin Pat going to listen to the pod as he goes.
Pat is going to listen to the pod,
fine.
so shout out Pat. So this is in a league that we're in together, Brian, Perfect 12, and I would call my team a pretender in this league. I currently would make the playoffs. I have no business making the playoffs. My team is not that great. I do think I have a lot of future value on the team. So I traded Sam Laporta and Michael Wilson, and I got back Trey McBride and Drake London. And I thought that was a pretty decent trade last week. I wasn't nearly as high on McBride last week as I am this week. So, man, I love that trade. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Slam dunk.
Since Pat is listening, I think it was a fair trade.
Fair deal, man. Good for Pat. Good for Matt. Everybody wins and goes home happy.
Pat's very successful in Dynasty, so I don't think he's sweating it too much. But
all right, Pat, you got posted.
and just Pat, I understand my team is absolutely horrific in that league, so I certainly can't talk to you right now. So, I don't think it like. Just value-wise, it was a tough one on the surface. I think even before McBride maybe is having a value explosion, now it's looking pretty bad. But Laporta maybe has a pop week and it's back. I don't know. He listened to our Michael Wilson rants, I think, early in the season.
I was going to say Michael Wilson at least looked a little decent with Kyler. It's not like he did nothing. So, I mean, we'll see. But, what do you got, Brian, for this week?
I had a couple trades at the 11th hour, basically. I didn't have anything until Sunday, which is very strange for me this week. But I got a huge one off here. So, David was talking about excess quarterbacks. I kind of did the same kind of thing with this roster build. And I had Deshaun Watson and Sam Howell as extra – or they became extra with this trade. So I traded Deshaun Watson, Sam Howell, and then George Kittle after a couple pop weeks, like we talked about. All of a sudden, people like Kittle again, and got Mahomes back. And this is also inflated scoring for QB scoring. So Patrick Mahomes is like, in context, he's projected for like 36 points this week. So it's a super inflated scoring.
So, I mean, I apologize to Pat. I think you have somebody to apologize to, whoever your league mate was.
It was Stone Sports Dude.
Stone Sports Dude. We love him.
I think everyone here knows him too. Yeah.
Good guy.
That guy, I love him because he doesn't really give a shit like what anyone else thinks. He's going off his gut, and he does. I mean, he is pretty damn successful from what I've seen, winning wise. So. I don't necessarily always agree with the strategy, but it seems to work out for him.
So I wasn't going to give this trade, but I'll quickly do my one trade because it was with Stoned Sport Dude.
Yes.
I had to pull it up on my phone because I didn't write it down. So I got Terry McLaurin, J.K. Dobbins, and Aaron Rodgers for Rashee Rice, Zach Wilson, Marvin Mims. So I received McLaurin, Dobbins, Rodgers. I sent Rashee Rice, Mims, Zach Wilson.
And you said it's a tank, right? I assume.
No, so it's interesting. So it's actually I'm a contender, but I was trying to. He needed a quarterback, so I offered Zach Wilson for Aaron Rodgers straight up. I didn't really have any use for Zach Wilson, and then it was just a counter battle. So basically, it was like a Rashee Rice McLaurin type of swap, Zach Wilson for Aaron Rodgers type of swap, and I probably gained on some of those. So I basically dipped or Marvin Mims Dobbins type of swap. So I'm a contender, but I'm trying to like build some value. I don't have any picks, so I was using kind of Dobbins as Rodgers as like pseudo seconds, hopefully down the line.
Yeah, I like that trade. I traded Zach Wilson for Aaron Rodgers literally the night Rodgers tore his Achilles. And that was so I would definitely take Rodgers over Zach Wilson. And then Dobbins is not a guy I'm trying to buy, but I do understand why you would buy him for the future value accrual. But if you have Wilson and Rodgers as a wash, so you basically traded Rice and Mims for McLaurin and Dobbins.
Yep, that's right.
I think that's fine. I don't think that's.
Yeah, I think that's fine. Rashee Rice, David, anything on Rashee Rice expected fantasy points wise?
Let me bring that up real quick. I dug into Rashee Rice recently. I'm a little concerned that we're kind of making him to be a lot more than he is. But I also am way too much of a coward to just sell rookie wide receiver on the Chiefs before the bye. But I think coming out of the bye, I'm going to be monitoring pretty closely. He does not make my top 48. Let me dig for this real quick.
While you're looking, that's conflicting with Jacob. So that's something that you guys might have an argument down the road here. He said that's one of his favorite buys right now.
Oh, Rashee Rice says?
He said that when he was on with us, yeah.
Yeah. I was talking with Dynasty IM, and we're both of like the maybe he's good.
Yeah.
I don't have that much conviction either way.
That's where I'm at too.
That's kind of where I'm at. I'm not. I think that's where I feel like
there for a while. Rashee Rice, Tank Dell, Josh Downs were all kind of in a cluster together from a value perspective, and I think Tank Dell and Downs have obviously moved up a little bit since then. Rashee Rice has kind of hung out, maybe dipped almost a hair.
I also remember Marvin Mims briefly was kind of brought up in that early season talk. So
first 4 weeks or so, yeah.
Life comes at you fast.
Yeah, before he retired, he was in that discussion. But
yeah,
win sprint champion on Monday Night Football this past week.
Mm-hmm. So I think for me, Rashee Rice and Marvin Mims are similar-ish cases in that early on they had really great yards per route run and targets per route run on these really small route shares. Since then, we haven't really seen any role growth out of Marvin Mims, and he's also just not had the big plays. So that 7.0 yards per route run has slowly dwindled. But for Rashee Rice, his route share has nearly doubled and his target share has not moved, meaning his per route peripherals have basically halved on a few things. So I'm a little concerned about that. But again, if there's going to be someone to emerge in Kansas City, it's probably Rashee Rice over the second half of the year. So I'm not selling right now, but I'm monitoring. As for his expected points per game, he's at 8.7 expected points per game and 10.4 points per game. Running a little bit hot on touchdowns, but small sample, nothing too crazy outlier.
All right, so let's go ahead and get to our closing out with our buys and sells of the week. I'll quickly go ahead and give out mine. Mine's Deontay Johnson. I was typing up to put Deontay Johnson as my buy of the week, and I said, well, you know what? I'm going to go send some offers. So I sent one and got Deontay Johnson, so he's my buy of the week. Expected fantasy points per game master. I know David won't be too upset about that. So, David, who is your buy or sell of the week?
Yeah, so buy of the week, previewed it earlier. I think Javonte Williams for me. Again, kind of previewed some of these names earlier, but he's been pretty impressive for me. I think I'm going to try to move some of my, middle-aged, middle points wide receivers that everyone still loves into Javonte, who, a couple years ago was like a second round startup pick. And now he's back and healthy and kind of doing the thing we wanted to see. So guys like
this past week.
Yeah, guys like DJ Moore, Deebo Samuel, Mike Evans, in that like middle points realm, and then also some running backs. Rashad White, valued right next to him, pretty easily prefer Javonte's talent, even though Rashad's actually had great usage recently. And then additionally, Pollard, Kamara, and Derrick Henry are in the RB1-ish range in expected points, but they're way older. And Pollard and Kamara are falling so short of where they should be that it's probably a bit of an indication they're edging towards washed. So again, tear down in value a little bit for the younger running back. Like, I'll take it all day.
So we're talking younger running backs. Let me just hop into my sell. And this is, again, similar to CJ Stroud. It's more on what he's being valued at. So it's conditional. Keaton Mitchell is, a rookie that people are really fawning over right now, for lack of a better term. And he looks great in his touches, but I think Todd had a tweet, I look up and he has 3 touches. If people are valuing him as like an early to mid second, which I saw some Twitter polls saying that they do, I don't have any of him, so this is not something that I can be actionable on. But if I did, and if you're listening and you do, please sell him for any early mid 2, please.
Mm-hmm. Watching Red Zone, I was convinced he had like 10 carries, and I got to the box with 3 carries and 1 catch. What happened?
Yeah, and Brian, I think what inspired you to make that the sell of the week, like we said, our friend Jacob, really smart guy we respect a lot. He was saying he's not selling for a mid 2. So that kind of caught our attention. Like, okay, wow. So people are valuing him like that. I like that. I'll be quick about mine. We covered him a little bit earlier. My buy of the week is Pop Douglas. Just very simply, I do not think he's ever going to be cheaper than he is right now for the next 5 to 7 years, let's say. And a lot of people don't even know who he is right now. So maybe you're in a league where the guy who's rostering Pop doesn't know what they have, and they just picked up some dude like a month ago, and he's just sitting on their bench. And I would go send an offer out. I'm comfortable buying Pop for a mid-second. I think you can buy him for less than that. I'm not sending a mid-second right away. That would be the high end that I would go. But my initial offer is probably going to be, let me send them a second and get Pop in a third back. That's probably what I'm looking to try and do.
You could also probably take some like dusty vets, like Cortland Sutton has scored a bunch of touchdowns, has like pretty decent points per game. If you could say, oh, here's Cortland Sutton who scored a bunch of touchdowns for Pop.
It's funny you say that. I was literally just when you were talking about your buy and sell, I was just thinking Cortland Sutton. Like, that's the perfect person to toss out there right now. It's a hot name.
Yeah, agreed.
All right. This has been great, David. Thanks for joining us. Can you remind everyone, where they can find you on Twitter? I know you do some stuff with Bulletproof.
Yeah. So on Twitter, I'm at DSP4150. You could also find me in the Bulletproof Discord. I do weekly reports on the wide receivers, as I teased earlier, in buckets. And pretty much every week on Tuesday, maybe Wednesday, I'll tweet out all of my expected points per game charts, and you can see what I'm looking at.
Awesome. Yeah, like we said earlier, you're a great follow. People should really go, jump in and see. Like I said, your stuff is really easily digestible. You can find the rest of us. Brian is at Brian_Leary1. Matt is at Dynasty Peasant. I am Todd at Dynasty Splex. So in close, Matt is buying Pop Douglas for a late 2. Brian is selling Keaton Mitchell for an early to mid 2. David is buying Javonte for those mid-range type talents like DJ Moore, Rashad White. And I'm buying Deontay Johnson for maybe your latest 1 or a couple of 2s. We'd really appreciate a rating review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and any likes or retweets of the podcast are a great help. For David, Brian, Matt, and myself, thanks for joining episode 1.09 of the Dynasty Market Watch podcast. Go send a trade offer.
Go C's.
Yesterday's price is not today's price.